You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're listening to Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Locked On Mets is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. If you are watching on YouTube, I promise this is the last audio-only episode. It has been a crazy whirlwind of a trip as I have been going through the Mets minor league system. I thought I would be back online today, but what they don't tell you is if you're trying to drive from Syracuse to New York City for a flight, you should maybe leave at like 6 o'clock in the morning because New York traffic, not great. And if you pull off the highway because Google Maps tries to tell you how to get around some of the traffic, not a good look either. I missed my 4 o'clock flight. I'm currently sitting in the cell phone lot at LaGuardia Airport to record this podcast on my cell phone, and I'm basically just taking advantage of the rental car and the fact that my flight coming out of New York back to South Florida does not leave until 9 o'clock, so I got some time to kill. Going to knock out your podcast now. For those of you who aren't aware, I am your host, Ryan Finkelstein. Again, I have been on this trip for about a week now. Looking forward to getting back home tomorrow to give you your usual content, but we got another game to discuss today. The Mets end up losing their final game against the Atlanta Braves, a blowout victory for Atlanta. I'll talk about how Tylor Megill fared in that game, how the Mets fared overall in the first segment. In the second segment, though, I want to talk about an article that I just wrote for JustBaseball.com. For those of you who don't know, I'm the managing editor at Just Baseball, and I wrote a deep dive article into Tylor Megill and how he's been so successful replacing Jacob DeGrom this season. So we'll go through that in the second segment and close out the show today talking about the Mets' upcoming 4-game set in Philly. But first, let's talk about the game at hand today. It was a pitcher's duel. You look at the first 5 innings, no runs were scored. Tylor Megill had a no-no through 4, which obviously was of note because he had just been part of the combined no-hitter that I was at on Friday night. If you want to check out that podcast when it comes to the absurd places and things I've done on this trip, to be at that combined no-no, to record that in my hotel room, to complete that podcast, the 800th episode of Locked On Mets in the hotel lobby. Now in the LaGuardia Airport cell phone lot to talk about Megill's next start here. And look, he was great early on. We're going to talk about him a lot more in the next segment. 9 strikeouts overall, but he ran out of gas. And the Braves got to him, and I don't really think there's a real point in belaboring it and discussing the disaster that was the 6th inning for the Mets as they gave up 7 runs, as Megill gave up 3, Ottavino gave up 3, Trevor Williams gave up 3. It took all those guys just to get through that 6, and then Williams did the yeoman's work to close out that game for the Mets to give them 3 2/3. Just your classic game for the long man, 53 pitches for Trevor Williams. Did his job. The Mets basically punted this one. If you listened to the show yesterday, and I talked about Buck Showalter, it is one that will do that. That at times, he's going to take a game at the end of a series and say, you know what? We got to not try to waste arms and chase this one. We got a 4-game set against the Phillies, and we need the bullpen arms to be fresh for that. So, you know, they tried it. If Ottavino, who was pitching for 3 consecutive days, could have gotten Megill out of that jam, that would have tried to get that final victory and win this series against the Braves. But, you know, if you go back and you listen to what I was talking about after the first game of the series when they lost to the Braves, and walking out with a split is still really good because it feels like most of the times in Major League Baseball, doubleheaders are split. So the Mets did all of their work by sweeping that doubleheader. Doing that allows you to lose this game and not feel too bad about it. The Atlanta Braves came in for a big series. They were up for it. Ronald Acuna Jr. fresh off the IL. They have a lineup that's very solid, and I think the Mets are going to have to do the best they can to play the Braves to a draw this year. I don't think they have to beat the Braves 13 times out of 19. I think they can go out, and if they play them 19 times and win 9 of those games even, I think they'll be in good shape because they can beat up on the Phillies. They can beat up on the Marlins. It's a good Braves team, even though the record right now is 12-15. That's not a clear indication of who they are and who they're going to be this season. So you look at the doubleheader sweep and the fact that you end up going into this or coming out of this series no different than the way you fared against the Braves in the standings going into it. I think that's a win for this Mets team. They did a great job. Shout out to Carlos Carrasco again for those 8 brilliant innings. And you come out of it, and right now, if these are updated, which I believe they are, so the Mets are still 6 games up on the Braves. That's a win. That's a win in my book to come out of that series alive and still have more than a 5-game lead against them, as you're now getting to the point in the season where you're going to play the Phillies and the Nationals. You can maybe beat up on some other teams. I think the Mets are in really good shape. So in a minute, what I want to do is talk about my latest article for Just Baseball, where I talked about how Tylor Megill has really filled in admirably for Jacob DeGrom. So we're going to get to that in just a minute. But first, it is Mother's Day, folks, and whether she prefers a statement piece or everyday subtle elegance, BlueNile.com has fine jewelry options for every mom. Shop high-quality classic diamond earrings, elegant tennis bracelets, or gemstone pendant necklaces by going to BlueNile.com. Blue Nile has jewelry experts on hand 24/7, available via phone or chat to help you find a memorable gift at every budget. When you commit to a piece, so does Blue Nile, as they have guaranteed service and repair for life. They also have the Diamond Price Guarantee, where you can contact Blue Nile to compare competitors' diamonds against one of your own, and in most cases, they can meet or beat that price. This Mother's Day, give mom something she'll treasure forever with fine jewelry from BlueNile.com, and Locked On Sports listeners get $50 off $500. This podcast exclusive is only good through Mother's Day, so use the code LOCKEDON. That's code LOCKEDON. Plus, every order is insured, ships free, and arrives in a discreet package that won't give away what's inside. Shop stress-free and find your forever piece by going to BlueNile.com today. All right, so I will leave a link to the article I wrote for Just Baseball so you can read it if you are interested. And basically, the title of the article is How Tylor Megill Filled the Massive Shoes of Jacob DeGrom. And you go back to spring training, right? Tylor Megill was the Mets' 6th starter. He was not supposed to be in this rotation. Yet, here he is pitching in the first combined no-hitter that the Mets have ever had. Here he is through that first month of the season, dominating, carving batters up, putting the Mets in a position where they had 4 elite starting pitchers to begin this year, with Megill, Carlos Carrasco, who we just watched pitch 8 innings the other day, Chris Bassett and Max Scherzer, and they've even gotten good production from Taijuan Walker and David Peterson. But it's Megill that has exceeded expectations, I believe, more than anybody else. And in this article, I talk about how last year Jacob DeGrom's injury really cratered the Mets season. He was playing like an MVP, and then he goes down and everything falls apart. And the Mets did a great job purchasing insurance this offseason by signing Max Scherzer, $130 million for 3 years. That was the first big step. Then they traded for Chris Bassett. Those are the guys that really are giving you the insurance for Jacob DeGrom. But what that did is that allowed Tylor Megill to be in his probably proper place heading into the season as the 6th starter, so that when push came to shove, you had a guy that you thought had some upside to take that 5th starter's job. But what he's done is he's transformed and been better than that. So the question is, how does he do it, and how is he similar to Jacob DeGrom? Well, obviously everyone remembers these guys debuted at the exact same age down to the day. They both debuted at 25 years old and 330 days. So that was the thing that first linked these guys. The fact that they throw hard, the fact that they're middle round picks. You have Megill an 8th round pick, DeGrom a 9th round pick. Guys who were throwers more than pitchers. DeGrom, a shortstop in college. Megill should have been playing basketball. I believe did play some basketball. And, was really just a hard thrower that got some opportunities. And a guy that really had to learn how to pitch and was originally looking at like a sinker ball or hard throwing guy who just went sinker and fastball, and then he decided to work on a 4-seam, and he developed a slider and a changeup, and he did a great job over the COVID year where there was nothing going on to really just completely transform himself. And you look at, the final season before Tylor Megill ends up getting to the big leagues. And, it took some time for him to establish who he would eventually become as a prospect. But then he makes it up. And through his first 7 starts, Tylor Megill's a 2.04 ERA last year with 38 strikeouts and 35 and a third innings pitched. And you think, wow, did they find somebody else? And then he wears down because it was a huge innings jump. The most he'd ever thrown in a season. He nearly doubled that last year. He ends up going and throwing 130 innings between the minors and the majors. Really got worn down, I think, a 6.13 ERA over his final 11 starts. But this year, what we've seen is a pitcher that's even better than the guy that we saw flashes of brilliance from last year. And so that led me to look at the stats and see, how did he do it? What does Tylor Megill do that makes him so difficult for these batters to pick up right now, that allows him to get these strikeouts? And the first thing you have to mention when talking Tylor Megill is the height. He's 6'7". Again, I mentioned basketball, more of a power forward than a starting pitcher. And the thing that's incredible about that is if you look at the extension he gets, it measures out on most of his pitches to 7'2", if not 7'1" on a curveball. So he's shortening the distance to the plate by 7 feet. Okay, that's just the incredible length that he has. And then you also have a release point that's very repeatable across the board with all of his pitches, with the fastball, the slider, the changeup. A batter isn't able to pick up what's coming their way. And so what Tylor Megill does really well is he utilizes his fastball that jumps on hitters with that extension he has. And it has that rising action, and he works that fastball up in the zone to get ahead of batters and to set up strikeout opportunities. He just tries to blow you away, but he has these other offerings with the slider to the righties and the changeup to the lefties that allow him to change eye levels and keep hitters off balance. And if you look right now this season, he's throwing harder than he did last year. Last year, 94.6 miles per hour. This year, 95.7. These stats were going into today's start, so I'm not sure how those could be tweaked by a degree or two with what we just saw today. But the bottom line is he's throwing harder, and the perceived velocity from hitters is a couple of miles an hour more than what the radar gun is showing based on that extension. So if a fastball comes in at 96, maybe it looks more like 98 to the batter. If a fastball comes in at 98, because at times we've seen Megill do that, that's where he's getting that really just insane blow-away stuff. And he's relying on that fastball nearly 60% of the time. So everything is predicated off of that. The run value of that pitch is -4. That's actually really good. That means he's taken 4 runs off, technically, I guess, is the simplest way to explain run value. It's just how effective that pitch is, essentially. And so that's one of his best offerings. It is his best offering because he uses it so much. And opposing batters are hitting just 189 against the pitch and whiffing at a 29.7% rate, which for a fastball, that's a lot of whiffs. Now, that fastball, as we know, that's why he's in the big leagues. That's why he has such a high ceiling, because a starting pitcher that can locate their fastball the way that Megill can really brings immense value, but he needed other pitches, and it's the confidence in his secondaries that is taking Tylor Megill to another level, because he's able to work that fastball up in the zone. He's getting batters to try to cheat fastball. They're seeing it 60% of the time, and then he changes eye levels with a slider that's 10 miles per hour slower, and he can just bury that pitch low and away to batters that are gearing up, and so that they swing through it because they're expecting that fastball up, and then that slider just tails right under their bat. Batters this season are hitting 0.54. This again was going into the start today. We're hitting 0.54 on that slider, and that was their slugging percentage as well. They're just not driving the pitch at all. A 40% whiff rate on his slider. Now the changeup is the one thing that I think Megill could improve still. That's going to take him and make him an elite pitcher, because lefties can still get to Tylor Megill, and he's going to use that changeup to try to get that similar break away from the batter down to change eye levels like he does with the slider. But this year, lefties are doing pretty well against the pitch. In general, the slugging percentage against his changeup is .565. and he's throwing it primarily to those left-handed batters. So if he's able to improve that changeup, we're going to see a better version of Tylor Megill, which is scary because he's already really good. But you see through this season, 7 extra base hits allowed, 5 on the changeup, 2 on the fastball, none on his slider. And through 5 starts this season, Megill is 4-0 with a 1.93 ERA, which was previously tied with Patrick Corbin, Patrick Corbin, atop an ERA leaderboard. Oh, man, that's funny. Corbin Burns, I meant. And Eric Lauer, the teammates from the Brewers, he was tied with them for the 11th best mark in baseball. His average against was 182 coming into the start. That was top 15. The whip was 0.86, which was also top 15. And in 28 innings, Megill had already exceeded his F4 from all of last season when he made 18 starts. So that's what he did through the first month. Obviously, this one, 3 earned runs and only getting 5 1/3. That's going to hurt the ERA. It's now at 2.43, but still, through 6 starts now, a 2.43 ERA from Tylor Megill. You could not have expected that. And when you look forward, I mean, the future of this Mets rotation right now, there's really no one that has a claim to it more than Megill because he's under team control for so long. And I think it's going to be a good quality pitcher for the next 6 years. And so the Mets have maybe hit another jackpot like they did with Jacob DeGrom. I'm not saying he's going to be Jacob DeGrom, but can he be a great number 3 starter for the Mets for the next 5 years? Absolutely. I think the floor is changing. The ceiling is what's exciting because who knows how good he really could be. But when you look at this Mets rotation moving forward, it's Scherzer for the next 3 years. Carrasco, maybe after this year, 1 more. Taijuan Walker, same thing. There's just not a lot long term. And then Jacob DeGrom is the biggest elephant in the room. What's going to happen with the injuries and with him getting back on the mound? And then if he is healthy for the end of the year, he could opt out. So just a lot that is in flux right now. And it just looks a lot better for a farm system that has not been developing pitching well, that traded a lot of pitching. To stumble upon a guy like this, it's just an incredible win for this Mets organization. Now, in the final segment, I will preview what lies ahead against the Philadelphia Phillies. So we're going to get to all that in just a minute. But first, I want to tell you about a partner that has a product that I use literally every day, which is Athletic Greens. For a while, I have been looking for a way to get more vitamins and nutrients into my daily diet, and Athletic Greens has been the perfect answer for me. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, recovery, focus, and aging. Athletic Greens has over 7,000 5-star reviews and is recommended by professional athletes. It costs you less than $3 a day, making it cheaper than your cold brew habit. It's the single best thing you can do for your body in under 60 seconds. And to make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/MLB Network. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/MLB Network to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. BetOnline is your number 1 source for all of your betting stats and sports info. Find out the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's basketball playoffs and the start of the Major League Baseball season. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in the action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, so let's look at the pitching matchups and what lies ahead here against the Philadelphia Phillies. So first off, the Phillies are coming off a series against the Texas Rangers where it looks like they've only played 1 game so far. I'm not sure if something got postponed there. You're looking right now, they have another game tonight, 6:45. I'm recording this again in the cell phone lot outside of LaGuardia Airport, and it's 5:15. So we will see what the Rangers do in that game. The Phillies do against the Rangers in that game. They're currently 2 games under 500, 11-13. They have gone 5-5 in their last 10. They're 5.5 games back from the Mets, so they will be at least 5 games back at the start of this series. Game 1, you got Taijuan Walker going against Aaron Nola. Taijuan Walker faced the Phillies his last time out, 5 innings, did not allow a run, did not get many strikeouts, but was very effective. Aaron Nola has been up and down this year. A 3.90 ERA, 34 strikeouts at this stage in the season. Game 2, Max Scherzer versus Kyle Gibson. Scherzer 2.61 ERA, 42 strikeouts. Gibson 2.93 ERA, 26 strikeouts. Then you have Bassett and Eflin. Bassett 2.61 as well for his ERA. Zach Eflin 4.50. And then in the last game of the series, Ranger Suarez will be on the mound. The question is, who will be going against him? You would figure Carlos Carrasco, if I'm not mistaken, right? He got Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Yeah, he would be good to go. So I'd imagine that's Carlos Carrasco. I don't know why they would necessarily go back to a David Peterson in that start, but we will see what the Mets end up going with there. Look, this is going to be a different series because it's played at Citizens Bank, and we're starting to see Kyle Schwarber get really hot. This is a Phillies lineup that can score runs in bunches, particularly in that ballpark, but maybe this is the exact series to get some of the Mets hitters going that have not been hitting the home run ball. Francisco Lindor, for his last 15, if I'm not mistaken. He could use some easy pokes. Luis Guillorme, shout out to him. I should have mentioned that. Guillorme hit a home run in the game today, and that would have been a crime for me to have not mentioned that he accomplished such a rare feat for the Mets utility infielder. But maybe it sparks a little run for Louis, because who knows, he can poke it out in that ballpark at Citizens Bank. Anybody can, but I think the Mets maybe could use a series like this where, not to say that they're going to get bad pitching. You certainly hope they get good pitching, and with Scherzer and Bassett on the mound in the final two games, or the middle two games, I should say, of that series, you're pretty confident in what the Mets are going to do pitching-wise. But it would be good to see them mash their way to some wins again, to hit some home runs, to see Pete Alonso maybe have a 2 or 3 home run series, to see Eduardo Escobar get on the board and start hitting some home runs. So I think a lot can happen for this Mets team. I'm looking forward to watching this series. And for our last show this week, I will be joined by Aram Layton. He doesn't know this yet, but I feel pretty confident I can get him on. We'll be recording the State of the Division podcast for Just Baseball tomorrow morning when I get back home, and I'll try to hit him for a home and home. We are going to talk Mets prospects after this trip I just went on. I want to go through Aram Layton's top 100 list. It just came out about a month ago, maybe a couple weeks ago at this point for Just Baseball, the 2022 updated list. So we'll tell you how high up Francisco Alvarez is, Brett Beatty, Mark Vientos, and the snub, Ronnie Mauricio. Mauricio was the prospect that stood out to me the most on this road trip I just went on. So I'm going to have a very passionate conversation with Aram, trying to advocate for Ronnie Mauricio to be considered for the update, to be included on the top 100 list next time around, or just to see what his take is on the flaws in his swing and why I think that maybe there's a little bit more that meets the eye with Mauricio. So that'll be a fun episode. Make sure you tune into that. If you're watching on YouTube, tomorrow I will 100% be on camera with Aram Layton. We'll be back to that normal setup, unless, of course, knock on wood, there's something happening with my flight here that I will be boarding in a couple of hours. Thank you to all of you who have been tuning in throughout this crazy trip I have been on, and for those of you who make Locked On Mets your first listen every day, and after your second listen, check out Locked On MLB, hosted by Paul Francis Sullivan. Locked On MLB is where you want to go to follow everything going on in Major League Baseball. You can follow Locked On MLB wherever you get podcasts.